So I'm super excited about this week's podcast, but I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the tragic event in Uvalde, Texas earlier this week. So this podcast is dedicated to the memory of those affected by such a tragic and horrific incident. There's a lot I'm going to cover in this week's podcast, so much so that I actually have to use my iPad because there's just too much information for me to remember and deliver it all in this podcast. So, what's it all about? Well, it's been a big week of news in the world of automotive and e mobility. Pretty much, if it has something to do with four wheels and a motor, I'm going to cover it in this podcast. But beyond that, it wasn't just about those subject areas. It's all pretty much focused in the USA. So we're going to have some fun with this one. We have a lot to talk about. So let's get to it. So, first, I don't even know where to begin, but let's talk about the state of Oklahoma. So, state of Oklahoma has approved the use of autonomous vehicles in the state. And pretty flexible rules around it. And Oklahoma is now the 29th state in the US that has a policy promoting autonomous vehicles. And in the state of Oklahoma, autonomous vehicles are allowed to use state roads, and they are able to do so without supervision. The disclaimer around it, as it relates to Oklahoma state law, is that emergency responders, so police and emergency medical staff, must be given instructions on how the vehicle operates. So, for example, how to either access the vehicle or to be able to disable the vehicle in the event of an emergency, as well as understanding how the vehicle is going to behave in an emergency situation. So, let's say there's a police response or an ambulance response to an emergency situation. So really what's behind it is Oklahoma is saying we need to keep pace with other states, and some of the bigger states are California and Arizona. The state of New York is also looking at autonomous vehicles and really promoting that as well. So once again, it looks like there's another step forward as it relates to the sort of field of self-driving vehicles or autonomous vehicles. So interesting to see sort of how things move forward. I don't want to get into the real analysis of it because there's just so much to talk about in the world of AVs, autonomous vehicles. So I'm going to move straight on to it. Waymo. So Waymo in the state of Arizona, where the company, which is an Alphabet owned company, and that's the parent company of Google, they are using the Waymo vehicles to handle rides to and from Phoenix Harbor International Airport. So the vehicles themselves won't be picking up passengers at the terminal, but there are transit stations near the airport that the Waymo vehicle will be dispatched to and from to take passengers to and from the airport, and that's going to be a 24/7 operation. So that's actually an extension of what Waymo is actually doing in the Phoenix area with autonomous vehicles. Now, currently, the Waymo vehicles are being monitored by a driver in the vehicle to intervene in the event of some sort of issue or disruption to the autonomous vehicle while it's in operation. But as it relates to Phoenix Harbor International Airport, well, the Waymo service is really a pilot for what Waymo intends to be fully autonomous vehicles without the assistance of a human in the vehicle. And the reason that they're doing that is because the Phoenix International Airport and most airports are a controlled route. So it's quite predictable, the environment and the different sort of operating conditions for the vehicle. And so Waymo, we don't know when, but it looks like they are laying the groundwork for deploying fully autonomous vehicles in the state of Arizona, especially around the airport, without the assistance of a driver. But that's also part of their bigger strategy. They use what's called the flywheel effect taking their learnings from markets where they are currently piloting and testing the Waymo service and really ramping up the capabilities of the autonomous driving service, whether that be machine learning or AI. And they're also collecting data that's localized to the various markets in which they operate. So, for example, the unique driving environment in San Francisco or Pittsburgh or New York, as well as Phoenix, Arizona. And what that's going to allow them to do is be able to deploy their services rapidly in new markets because they're gathering all of that data. So again, another big step for the area of autonomous vehicles, and we've heard what Tesla is doing with full self-driving. Elon Musk has announced by end of the year that the vehicles will be available for full self-driving, or at least another release of the full self-driving suite as it relates to Tesla. And so it looks like there's really what look like a robotic race for these autonomous vehicles. And so there are a lot of people who are against autonomous vehicles and whether they should be sharing the road with public traffic and pedestrian traffic as well. But there are two things happening. These companies, these mobility companies with the autonomous vehicles, they are taking advantage of policy in places where it's favorable. So, Arizona, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and now Oklahoma to really pilot their autonomous vehicle technology. And states are starting to increasingly get on board with it as well. So, for those who are doubtful or those who are against it, this is something to keep a close eye on as it relates to what the possibilities are for autonomous vehicles and how quickly. So, what do you think? Are you for or against autonomous vehicles? Do you think there are specific use cases for them? Or do you think that they should be sharing public roads with pedestrian traffic and human drivers? And also, what do you think needs to be adapted to support autonomous vehicles? Do roadways need to be adapted? Do traffic signals need to be adapted? Do we consider 5G for these types of things? There are all sorts of considerations. So I'd like to hear what you think about that. But that's yet another big step in the world of autonomous vehicles. So going on to that, it's kind of a tough one because where do I begin? Hyundai has made some huge announcements over the past couple of weeks. Hyundai Motor Group, and it's really targeted toward the U.S. So they've already announced a $5.5 billion EV plant in the state of Georgia, which is set to open in 2025, and that's going to be on a, I believe, 3,000 square foot site in the state of Georgia, Bryan County, Georgia. And it's a strategic location because there's the port of Savannah in which they can import parts or export vehicles. So that's a big announcement, one for Hyundai's EV plans inside of America. But going on to the mobility component, Hyundai has a partnership with Aptiv, and there's also a joint venture that they have together called Motional. And what Motional is again an autonomous vehicle on-demand service that Hyundai and Aptiv are partnering together to begin delivering services to people. And currently in Santa Monica, California, they are piloting the Motional service with local restaurants for autonomous delivery of food orders to people. And the plan is to expand that service into Los Angeles as it continues to undergo testing. And the way that works is the customer places an order to a local restaurant. The Motional vehicle, which currently is a Hyundai Ioniq 5, picks up the food order, and then it is dispatched to the customer who comes out and picks up the food order. So yet another development in the world of autonomous vehicles and being backed by a large auto manufacturer through their joint venture with Aptiv. So it's just huge as it relates to autonomous vehicles. Very curious to sort of see what comes of all of this and how quickly. There's a lot of learnings that are being gathered as it relates to road conditions and data, and so again, this could really accelerate the sort of advancement of autonomous vehicles very quickly. Um, One of the things that can't be lost in all of this is the focus on the U.S., which I'm going to get to momentarily. These developments are all happening inside the U.S. from countries. I'm sorry, from auto manufacturers that are based in other countries. So, very curious to see what happens there. So, gonna go back a little bit more to Hyundai, and so Hyundai, on top of the 5.5 billion dollar EV plant that they've announced, they've got a planned $10 billion investment in the U.S. By 2025. And those investments do incorporate what I mentioned earlier. So the EV plant in Georgia, the Motional service joint venture with Aptiv, and the on-demand services. And then they're also looking at expanding into advanced air mobility, AAM, eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing type of vehicles. And they're also looking at AI, artificial intelligence, digital infrastructure. So it's a huge investment that Hyundai Motor Group is making in the U.S. And what's really driving all of it? Well, their goal is to be a top three EV and mobility company. And so they are making all the right moves with the actual sort of manufacturing of the EVs inside the US, and then their mobility services that they're piloting inside the US as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on. We already know about what Tesla is doing, and we hear about it weekly. We know about Google and Waymo. Uh, GM has their cruise service as well. I know that they're really pushing to open up or expand in the California Bay Area region, meaning San Francisco and Oakland, California. So there's just a huge amount happening inside the US. So I want to hear from you about what you think about it, or if there are any services that I didn't mention that you feel are worthy of mentioning, or deeper exploration. So I'd like to hear from you on that. So, going on a little bit more as it relates to these mobility services, want to talk about really what's driving all of this. So, we hear about China and companies, EV manufacturers like Neo and Xpeng. We know about WeChat and Alipay, and how much is so much digital commerce, so much digital transactions in China. There's hardly any use of physical cash in the country, and China obviously has a robust sort of innovation sector, and sort of digital platforms and so on. And it's easy to sort of forget about the U.S. The U.S. is a very large country, lots of roads, and there's lots of innovation in the U.S. And maybe there's some thinking that the U.S. isn't innovative anymore, but if there were any doubt, this last week or two of announcements, I think, really shows why the U.S. is such a unique market, what it offers a mobility company or an auto manufacturer. Can't say enough about Tesla. Tesla has recently opened the Texas Gigafactory. That factory is capable of outputting or producing 1 million Tesla vehicles per year. They're going to produce Model Y and Cybertruck out of that factory. And the Cyber Rodeo was, what, maybe just over a month ago from the time of this recording. So uh, when we look at it in total, the U.S. is just full of opportunities, and I think that this is really going to be a turning point, a pivot point, as it relates to opportunities in the U.S., innovation in the U.S., employment, labor, uh, the tech industry, the advancement of the automotive industry, digital, and so on. So, and again, then there are the companies that are already well established. You've got Microsoft, you've got Amazon, you've got Apple. We don't know sort of what those companies may have going. Rivian is about to really go to market with their Rivian pickup truck and SUV. We've got Lucid Motors, former founded by a former Tesla executive. So the U.S. is looking quite attractive right now. So it's an exciting time, and maybe this could be a renaissance of the automobile age. But this time we're seeing it as a sort of a digital kind of version of it, and mobility version of it as well. So let's see what happens. So moving on, want to talk about Stellantis. So Stellantis is a very large sort of umbrella company for several automotive brands. So there's Fiat, there's Opel in Europe, and then also you've got, I believe, Maserati under that umbrella as well. But then you've got the Chrysler brands as well. So Jeep, Dodge, and Ram trucks. But if you look at Stellantis' portfolio, there's not a lot of electrification in that portfolio, and as we think about sort of the at least the American portfolio of car companies, that puts Stellantis in a very difficult position as it relates to Tesla being a leader, but Ford and General Motors are really evolving their electrification strategies. And so then you've got the foreign or international automakers, so Hyundai, Kia. Who have aspirations in the American market, Mercedes Benz, BMW, Volvo, of course, Volkswagen. And so that leaves Stellantis really kind of in a trailing position, if not in a vulnerable position. So, where am I going with this? So, Stellantis has just announced a $2.5 billion deal with Samsung SDI to open a gigafactory in Kokomo, Indiana. And so the goal there is to have that plant online by 2025. I believe that they're targeting 30 to 40 gigawatts of annual capacity once they get that plant going. So the battery production is going to be there for Stellantis if all goes to plan, being supported by Samsung. But Stellantis has to develop the vehicles to put them in. So their strategy is to achieve by 2030 50% of their car portfolio inside the US to be electrified, and 100% of passenger vehicles in Europe to be electrified. So they've got a clear strategy, and they're building the gigafactories to support that strategy. And in order to meet the production goals, they're going to take the combined output of their gigafactories to produce these EVs. And they have five gigafactories between the US and Europe. I'm not sure what their presence is in Asia, but I do know that they're going to leverage the combined output of the gigafactories between US and Europe. So keep an eye on Stellantis, the portfolio of products, how well that's received in the market. But Stellantis has a lot of catching up to do when you're considering the likes of Tesla and Volkswagen and Mercedes and BMW are on the move as well. But very interesting. And once again, the focus is on the US as it relates to manufacturing and the development of these electrified products, these electric car products. Very interesting, very exciting time. So now, want to go on to maybe a little bit smaller, but it does really speak to mobility. Bank of America, one of the U.S.'s largest banks, they've got a partnership with Electrify America to expand the number of EVs at Bank of America, EV chargers at Bank of America financial centers. So currently there are about 160 Electrify America chargers at Bank of America financial centers. The goal is by 2023 to expand that to roughly double, so about 320 Electrify America chargers at Bank of America financial centers. Now, in this world of digital and especially digital banking, fintech, does it really make sense to have that kind of rollout of EV chargers? Well, of course, some people still need to go to the bank, but it can't be a bad thing. EV charging infrastructure is a huge necessity worldwide, so it's nice to see that joint venture between Bank of America and Electrify America. And as it relates to electrification, EV charging, the infrastructure, a good example for retailers and service providers to begin considering this as a real value add to their customers and to be able to attract new customers. EV owners are a different type of owner who present a new set of opportunities for service providers who do offer EV charging at their facilities. So let's keep an eye on that, and hopefully more service providers, more retailers will follow suit. All right, so going on to the next topic, uh, want to look at sort of we're talking a lot about EVs, but you have to produce these EVs and they need materials, and one of the key materials are cobalt and nickel for these EVs. And so last year. EV demand from automakers exceeded the demand from smartphone and PC manufacturers for cobalt. And why is that important? Well, these small devices, consumer devices, laptops, smartphones, and so on, have typically used cobalt in their devices. And now here come automakers looking for that same material to produce batteries. And I don't need to tell you that, but obviously the battery requirements for an EV are much bigger than the battery requirements for a consumer device. Okay, so picking it back up, it's going to be interesting to see how these auto manufacturers continue to meet the demand for EVs with a very limited resource and an increasingly expensive resource, and then competing with consumer electronics manufacturers for that resource. Does demand ultimately outstrip supply? Does it? Are there sort of supply constraints in both the consumer electronics sector and the automotive sector? So let's keep an eye on that and see what happens. But definitely something to watch to see exactly how this is going to unfold between two very large industries. And then just again, more mobility news. There isn't enough of it. Tesla is building the U.S.'s uh, largest charging station, and they're going to be building a Tesla supercharger station in Barstow, California. That's going to be a 100 station EV charging location, and that's absolutely huge. It's in a key location between California and Nevada. So along that route, EV owners will be able to charge up their electric vehicles and not have to go through the hassle of waiting for other people to finish charging their EVs. And so it's an opportunity for people to travel long distance routes fairly conveniently. And also for the city of Barstow, it does provide a tax benefit for Barstow because between shopping and services, and also providing the electricity for the supercharger stations provides benefits to the local economy. So, congratulations to Barstow, and Tesla continues to expand the support for EVs with EV charging infrastructure. Uh, so, I talked about Stellantis and Samsung SDI. I talked about um, Hyundai's plans for electrification. This news came from a couple of weeks ago, but BMW and CATL, and so that's China's largest battery manufacturer. They are jointly exploring a site for a gigafactory, and they're looking at Kentucky and I believe South Carolina as potential sites for a gigafactory, and that's to support BMW's electrification plans inside the US. And so BMW currently has a plant in South Carolina. They make SUVs at that plant. I believe X5 SUV is made at that plant. So when we're talking about electrification from BMW, they could be making a particular product, a particular electrified product, and exporting that out into the world from South Carolina. So it will be interesting to see where the decision is for that gigafactory between BMW and CATL. All right. Well, this has been a full one. Hopefully, it's been interesting and informative for you. I would love to know what you think about all of these different developments. My name is Mark White. Thanks for checking out this podcast. Look forward to bringing you the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Really do appreciate you following and listening. And so until the next one, take care.